Hi there, it's the Common Magician, and as always, I've got something interesting to show you. I've got a deck of cards here, and what I want you to do is I want you to just give them a shuffle. You can shuffle the cards as much as you want until you're satisfied that they are completely mixed up. Once you've done that, I'm going to make a prediction. So this is from a deck that you have mixed up, that you have shuffled. I'm going to take one card out. This will sort of be my prediction card based on what you did here. So let me see if I can find the card I'm thinking of. I think I've got it right here. And I don't want you to see it just yet, but I'm going to set it right out there. And again, you shuffled these cards. I haven't changed the order. I'm going to try something here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, you can see out here in the mirror what's going on here. I'm just going to give the cards a shuffle, and I want you to tell me when to stop. And you can tell me to stop at any point. So again, as I shuffle, just tell me when to stop. You might say stop right there, right? And we'll stop right there, and we'll take the card that we stopped at, and we'll take a look at it. You stopped at the 7 of clubs. 7 of clubs. This will be important in a moment here. Actually, I forgot. I want you to do it again. I'm going to shuffle, and I want you to tell me when to stop. So I'll shuffle, and just tell me when to stop. Any comfortable place. You might say stop, right? And we'll stop right there, right where you stopped. And there's another card right here. And I forgot to mention, actually, I need you to pick one. Value or suit. Value or suit. Doesn't matter which one you pick, but I want to make sure you have the choice. So value or suit. Value? Fine. So we'll use the value here, which is the 7, and then the suit will be, hopefully this isn't a club. If it's something else, we'll use that suit. And it is a heart, 7 of hearts. Okay, so just to be clear here, you shuffled the cards. I made a prediction. You told me when to stop, and you had free choice out of a random shuffle. You picked what these cards were going to represent. And you pick the value here for the 7, and this is the suit hearts, 7 of hearts. And if we look here, my prediction's been sitting out here the entire time before we selected these from a deck that you shuffled. And it happens to be the 7 of hearts. This is Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and I mentioned this in one of the last videos that I put out, the most recent one, where I discussed the top stock retention false shuffle, overhand false shuffle. It was something that I mentioned in the last video, and I mentioned that this topic of the overhand false shuffle, specifically the top stock retention, a very old kind of basic move, that this is a super valuable move, and it's probably worth devoting a short or even a long video segment on. I don't think this is going to be very long. We're going to try to keep this somewhat shorter compared to most discussions, but I thought it was worth spending a video just on this one move because it's such a simple move. And I remember, I've mentioned this before, I remember a long time ago in the Magic Cafe, a web forum for magicians, there was a poll taken in the messaging room there about if you had only one move, one sleight, if all of the sleights in card magic were thrown away but one was left, which one would you need to keep? And people said a variety of different things. Some people said, the classic pass or the classic force, or some people, a lot of people went for those big ones that honestly most people don't do. Most people don't do the classic pass, and most people don't do the classic force, right? The one where you take a little bit of a risk and get someone to pick a specific card. But those are the things that people mentioned. Some people said double lift, which was another very common response. I said the underspread call, the Hofzinser spread call, and you know that that's one that I like, and I can do a wide variety of tricks just with that one move. You can do an ambitious card routine just using that move. You can do you can use it as a control. You can use it as a force. You can do a lot of things. But I will say this: if I were to pick a second move, not the spread call, not the Hofzinser spread call, but if I was to pick one other move that I could do a wide variety of tricks with, I would say the overhand false shuffle top stock retention. And the reason is because it's very, very versatile. It can accomplish a lot of things, and it's easy. It's something that's very, very easy to learn and very, very easy to do. It doesn't need any other advanced controls. You can just use that. The reason being that if I, for example, if I was looking through the deck of a shuffle deck, right, and there's a particular card I wanted to use, I could merely cut. Let's say I wanted to use the 3 of diamonds. I could simply cut at that, put the cards back together. I could just do a cut, right, and follow that up with the overhand top stock false shuffle. And I've nullified the fact that I've done a cut, right, in the eyes of the spectator. This looks completely fair. If you're looking out there in the mirror out there, right, this motion of shuffling looks very haphazard and very, very, very fair. It doesn't look like it's controlled in any way, but the reality is, of course, that I still have my 3 of diamonds. So it's a shuffle that by itself can be used. You don't have to set it up with any other advanced control. You can simply put the card of interest where you want it, and then the mere fact of following up with a shuffle, an overhand shuffle in particular, that looks like that, it nullifies anything that came before it in the eyes of the spectator. There's reasons for that, as we'll talk about here in a moment. The shuffle looks completely authentic in contrast to other false shuffles, right? If I take a table riffle shuffle, a true one, right? So that's a true table riffle shuffle. And I do a false table riffle shuffle, right? Let's say I needed to retain a top stock on a table shuffle. If I did this, right, this has a problem to it, that there's a big gap there. And I could even try to do the standard thing where you switch sides and you still retain the top. And, you know, until I follow that up with some other additional false cut or something, some kind of a sequence, that has a good tell to it. It's pretty obvious for someone who knows what they're looking at what I did. Likewise, if I was doing a blind shuffle, like a zero shuffle, this looks quite a bit different. Even if I'm doing it well, which I'm not sure that was done well, but if I'm doing it well, it looks very different from a real riffle shuffle, table riffle shuffle. And there's no way to get around that. You can't make a false table shuffle look absolutely like the real thing. You have to cover things in various ways depending on the type that you're doing. The overhand false shuffle, on the other hand, looks exactly like the real thing. It looks exactly like it, right? If you're looking in the mirror, this is what it looks like. It's a mess, right? And this is how it's done by, typical people, flipping cards and whatever. This is just what it looks like. It's a very sloppy kind of get to the point, down to business, home card game kind of shuffle. And if I falsify it, it looks the same. It looks exactly the same. It doesn't look any different at all from the spectator's point of view. So it's the kind of shuffle that a magician can look at, and even if they suspect that you're doing what you're doing, they can't know for sure that you're doing what you're doing if you're doing it right. It's really a completely burnable kind of move. Again, a magician could suspect it, but you couldn't know it. Like you can with a lot of other things. Now there, other false shuffles, and then, it's like an in the hand sort of false shuffle, a blind shuffle, like the this is the kind of the zero shuffle version in the hands, right? The Einstein shuffle. You can see from the front and from the back what it looks like. That's one that I like to do. It's different. It's different than a real in the hands shuffle. It's not exactly the same. Now, on the in an offbeat, if you're not drawing attention to it, it looks okay. But when you're looking at it, when you're burning it, you can see what it is if you know about it. Now, if you don't know about it, you wouldn't know anything different. Again, the overhand false shuffle is a burnable move. It looks exactly the same when you're falsifying it as it does when you're not. Now, there are other types of overhand false shuffles that don't look authentic. For example, I could do a completely blind version of it. And there's a few ways to do that, and this is not what the tutorial is about. But I could thumb off one card at a time and go through like 8 cards, right? I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, throw on top, and then do 8 again. And then I've really done a blind shuffle. The other version of that is to drop half and then thumb off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Drop, out jog, pick up the bottom, and then do 8 again. That doesn't look real. It needs to have some kind of a diversion, some kind of a misdirection to it. But a stock retention shuffle looks real, looks completely genuine. And the shuffle also resembles basic skill, and there's an advantage in that. If I'm doing some other kind of shuffle, this starts to represent a higher skill set. In the interest of gambling cheating, right? At the very beginning of gambling cheating, if you go back to your Erdnase, it's said in there that you want to do things that look normal, that look basic, that look fundamental, look rudimentary to everybody else sitting at the table. If you're doing things with the cards that look advanced, then you are giving yourself away. Well, so it goes for magic to a certain extent. If I'm a cardist and I'm doing all kinds of fancy schmancy things and cuts and flips and doodads and everything here, when I go to do a basic trick, as a spectator, I think big deal, because you just demonstrated that you can put things wherever you want to. And it's impressive that you can do that. Don't get me wrong, but I expect you to do it. If I present with overhand shuffling rather than anything else, I'm not doing fancy cuts, I'm just shuffling cards like this, like any other person would, then whatever I do on the other side of that looks a whole lot more amazing. So those are the things you should think about it. My thoughts in advance before we look at the actual move and what we can do with it. There's no need for advanced controls. You can do this just by itself as a wide variety of different things, your controls and forces, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The shuffle looks completely authentic in contrast to other false shuffles. It's just kind of superior in that way. Now, it doesn't seem superior to most. One would think that the most superior false shuffle would be one that looks perfectly interlaced like that, that is falsified. And that's true, but it is superior in the respect that you can't make those other shuffles look like the real thing perfectly, whereas you can with this, right? And then the third thing, again, the shuffle resembles basic skill, which is an advantage to a magician when you're trying to pull off an effect. If you can demonstrate basic skill and an amazing thing happens, it's all the more amazing because you didn't seem to apparently do anything tricky. Everything looked on the up and up. So those are my initial thoughts. Let's look at what we can actually do with this, and we'll look at that little presentation that I did at the beginning there, as well as a few other possible effects. So quickly defined after that discussion, what is it? What is the shuffle? What does it look like? I can't just assume that you know what it is, even though this is a quite basic thing, and it should be something you learn right at the very beginning. And if this is new to you, that's wonderful. I'm glad, because once you know this, you should use it a lot. But this is what it looks like. I want to retain either one or a grouping of cards at the top. I can really retain as much as 2/3 of the deck. You could really retain a whole lot of cards. Now, the more you retain, the less authentic it will look. That doesn't mean you can't get away with it, but the bigger your stack that you need to keep in place, the more difficult it is to make it look genuine. So this is usually used to hold back maybe 10 cards or so, just a small grouping at the top, up to about 1/4, something like that. So the top stock. a grouping of cards. And the reason why we call this a stock or a top stock retention is that it would have been used in gambling. This is when the deck has been set up, the cards have been culled out either in the collection of cards or some other maneuvering. They've been stacked into a sequence that will be dealt out to players to give an advantage to a particular player at the table. And in order to do that, the dealer, the cheating dealer, needs to shuffle the cards in such a way that they retain that stock and put it back on top. So that's the origins of this. The way it works is you would throw off your stock to start with, or rather you can think of it like this. You're going to start by picking up everything else besides the stock, plus a little bit of a margin. So if I'm just keeping back the first few cards, I'm going to lift up about 2/3, about that much, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm first going to in-jog the top card. I'm going to thumb off one. Now you can actually throw a group, but it's better if you take one so that you have more cards to play with and make this a little sloppy. Some people will make a big deal about how small this in-jog is, that you want to make it as small as possible. I found that to be nonsense. I think you can make this an inch, and it really won't matter, as long as everything that comes next is as erratic, right? So I've got my first card. Here's my top stock. I leave it behind. I thumb off one card in jog towards myself, so it's sticking out. And then I'm going to shuffle off normal on top of that, and sloppy. So they're going up, they're going down. So here's my situation. I've got a very clean block. Oh, hit my camera here. Sorry, didn't mean to make you motion sick. I've got a small block down here that I'm retaining. I've got my in-jog, and then I've got a bunch of slop above that. If you look in the mirror, everything looks clean. It looks like a sloppy shuffle. Now what I'm going to do is with my right hand, I'm going to you have to do two runs of this shuffle to make it work. You can't just do it once, you have to do it twice. On the second pass, I'm going to push forward with my thumb on my in-jog card, and then square. And what that does is it creates a break. Now, here's the second thing. I've heard a lot of people say that you want to make this break as small as possible. I've found that that's not necessarily true either. You can make this break as big as I've got it right here, about 1/2 inch. And from the front perspective, particularly if you're looking at the face of the cards, this looks okay, that you don't notice this break. It's not something that you see, especially once the cards start moving. This is not very angle sensitive. The bad angle is really, the only real bad angle is the one that you see. And no one else should be able to see that. Now, you could justify that someone off to your right, looking down at this corner, might see this. But that's a pretty odd angle to be standing at, and you could just do a little bit of a shift. Or again, work on keeping your break small. But otherwise, don't worry about how big the break is. You really can make it quite big and make this work. So I've picked up my break, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shuffle fair in groups. Don't ever worry, by the way, when you're doing overhand shuffle. I've heard people talk about just practicing their overhand shuffle and not dropping or flipping cards. Drop and flip cards, it's okay. The only thing that matters is that you have control of the stock that you're cheating, right? The one you're trying to retain. But you can always pick up a card and throw it back in the middle. That's okay. So I'm going to shuffle fairly until I get down to my break, and then I drop that stock back on top. So that's the move. Up to speed, here it is. There's my stock. I in-jog one card. I shuffle fairly on top. I lift up at my break, and then I shuffle fairly. Then I drop on top, and of course I flipped a card, and that's okay. Like I said, you can just go right back in there and flip it over. The messier the better in some cases. But that is the essence of the top stock retention overhand shuffle. So what can we do with it? Let's talk about a few things here. First and foremost, this is a control, so it can be used merely as a control. You can use it to lose a selection. The control I hate the most is the double undercut, and I see some people use it all the time, and I think it looks so awkward. Even to a lay spectator, it looks like something fishy's going on. That's when you do something like this. You have a card taken, selected, looked at, right? And it's put on top, and then the deck is cut. You say, we're going to cut it into the deck to lose it, and then we'll give it, and usually this move has narration with it, right? And then we'll give it a few cuts. And I just hate that terminology and I hate that visual because it looks like you just put it back on top. And so many people do it. It's a horrible control. It's a very basic control that people learn, and it's probably not worth learning in the first place. It's just not a good control. You can do essentially the same thing with the overhand top stock retention, and it looks so much more fair. So again, in our version, you have a card selected that's looked at and memorized, and you throw it on top like normal, and essentially be like doing the same thing where you're going to cut the deck, but instead of cutting, we're going to go into a shuffle, and I'm just going to in-jog the top card and shuffle on top, and then I'm going to pick up again and shuffle again. This looks like mayhem. I mean, it looks like nothing. It looks like a 52 shell game, right? Where instead of 3 shells or 3 card Monte, it's 52 card Monte, where everything's getting mixed up and there's no way to know where things are at, right? And it looks like the performer could not keep track of what's going on, but there it is, right? So it's just a far better and easier sleight, really. Card is selected, it's looked at, throw it on top. You say, we'll just lose that in there. It's not important anyway where it's at. Now, again, from my perspective, you can see the break in the gap. But from the front, that looks like a totally genuine home game over-the-hand shuffle. Looks totally fair. Looks like a mess. And it doesn't look like anything could have been kept in that. It looks really, really believable. So that's the first use of it. It's a control. You can use it to control a selection by pretending to lose it when actually you're maintaining it in a place. You can also bring a selection to the top. So this isn't really exactly the same thing, but it's the same kind of concept. You could have a card returned anywhere in the deck, right? You push the card in, and as you push it in, you grab a break above it, pinky break above it. So you just grab the break with the pinky over there. And then what you do is you pivot the deck over, you hold that break, you shuffle fairly on the top section, and then you throw on top. You might even want to follow that up with another double round of it, just to say, and we'll shuffle it in just to make sure that we don't know where it's at. Completely fair, right? And again, the more sloppy you are with it and haphazard you are with the deck, the better this looks. But of course, we've moved it to the top. One way or the other, I prefer when I'm using it as a control like this to just stick it on the top and then shuffle it in, because it gives you better control. It's less shuffling to do, and it looks just as good, and it looks really, really fair. So you can use it to bring a selection up to the top or to control it and maintain at the top. And again, as I said, you can also use it in terms of control. You can use it to retain a top stock. So if I have a grouping of cards at the top that are important for a trick, I can use it to control those cards in an unfair way and keep them together on the top. So that is how you can use this as a control, to get a selection to the top, to keep a selection at the top, or to keep a grouping at the top where you can deal it out at some point during the routine. It can also be used as a force. So you can use this top stock retention to force a card. And it looks kind of like this. I'll show you a different version of this that you are very familiar with. And the version looks like this. I'm going to force, right? I'm going to say, tell me when to stop. And of course you can see I'm doing the Hindu shuffle. And they say, stop. You say right here, and then you show the card. Jack of spades is the one that I forced because I'm forcing the bottom card on the deck. So I got my bottom card. We'll say it's the 3 of diamonds. I do my Hindu shuffle, and they tell me when to stop, and I stop here. From the front, it looks really authentic, and I show that. The overhand top stock retention is the same thing, except we're going to be forcing the top card. Okay, so the way this looks is we have our card up here, the King of Spades, and I'm going to say what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my setup to describe what the spectator is going to do. I'll say I'm going to shuffle the cards like this, and I start by giving it the overhand, the in-jog, and then the overhand shuffle. I pick up at the break, and I've explained I want you to tell me when to stop. And now when I do it the second time, they'll go, and as soon as they say stop, I'm going to throw the balance of cards on top, and then I finish it out, right? So again, we have your force card here, nine of hearts is the case. And I'll say, I'm going to shuffle the cards, and what I want you to do is I want you to tell me when to stop. Make sense? Okay, so let me shuffle. Just say stop anytime. And they say stop, and you throw on the balance of cards above the break. And you say right here, and then you throw it on top, and then you say this is the card that you stopped at. And it's a force. You forced the card on them. So you can force it, and it looks super fair, because this looks like a shuffle that everyone does. When I'm doing the Hindu shuffle, well, there may be people that shuffle like this in India. I don't know. Okay, I don't know. But this looks like a magician shuffle. This looks slick and smooth, right? This looks fishy. And I know I'm being sloppy here. I'm working around a camera in front of my face, but this doesn't look as natural as this. If I say tell me when to stop and I do that, that looks really quite fair. So you can force a card with it. You can also force, and this will get into the tutorial for the demonstration I did at the very beginning, you could force a variety of cards to get you to another selection. This is something I've shown you before on other routines. We're going to force the top cards, but we're going to force several cards in a row, or two cards in a row that will indicate another card. So here's the quick tutorial. This is where the rubber hits the road for that initial trick. You could have the spectator shuffle the cards fairly, and then you say, I'm going to take out a prediction card. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the deck, and I'm noting the top two cards, and hopefully I have two different suits. If I have the same suit, what I'll need to do is I'll need to say, let me see, and cut the deck, and then take whatever I have next, right? So I have ace of diamonds and 5 of clubs. I'm going to look for the ace of clubs. Ace of clubs. So this value in that suit. So I'm going to go through here, and once I find the ace of clubs, I'll pick it up and set it down as my prediction. You say, I'm going to shuffle like this, and jog. Pick up and say, now tell me when to stop. And I'll say stop anywhere, and when they say stop, you just throw on the balance, and then throw the rest on, say, okay, there it is. This is the card that you picked, ace of diamonds. I tell you what, I want to do that again. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I need you to tell me when to stop. What I'm doing is I'm pretending to be too far ahead of myself, but I've really just set up for my my in-jog here. That's another little nuance, subtlety in performing, is the, oh, I forgot effect. Or, I'm sorry, I dropped that. Let me try again. That little diversion to actually allow you to accomplish something important. So you start shuffling and say, oh no, I forgot. I need you to tell me when to stop. And then you say, okay, go ahead. And they'll say stop, and you throw the balance and stop right there midstream. Say, okay, right here. Clubs. There's another little subtlety. This is an equivoque that I like to do whenever I'm doing this particular kind of force, whenever I'm doing a 2-card force for a 1, which is a really good way to convince a spectator that they've thought of a card. You can say, we're going to get a randomized card, and then you say, now think of this card after you've come to it, right? Think of that for us. And later on you can, I did this for my version of Acon, which is the cleanest version of Acon that I can get to. This is the pre-trick work. And it involves this equivoque. You say, value or suit. And if they say value, say great. And what you're doing is you're gesturing with this card to that card. You say value or suit. And you could be gesturing, or you could be talking about this card. What am I doing? I don't know. It's hard to say. You say value or suit. And if they say suit, say great. This will be the suit right here. So we'll take the value ace, and the suit will be clubs, right? As if they picked it. If they say value, say great. We'll take the value here, and we'll use this for the suit. So that's the ace of clubs. So there's a free choice there. So you're going to be thinking of the ace of clubs, right? So that's the force. And it's a force to that card there. So I'm just using the natural pattern of the shuffle that the spectator gave me to pull out a prediction card. In this case, it would be a jack of spades, right? Set it out there. Then I force the top 2 cards in an overhand shuffle, and you have a trick. You've got a pretty interesting kind of miracle. And you can always go back and recap that. Say, you shuffled the deck. I didn't change the order. You know, you made these free selections, and this is where we got it. So anyway, you can use it as a force. You can force a value and a suit, and then get to a particular force card. That's also one of the Animan 202, I think is what it is, or is it 100? I can't remember the title. But it's one of the forces from his book, is this exact thing that I just demonstrated. You can also use it to hold a very large stack, right? So let's say I wanted to get an entire sequence of cards. So let's say, I don't know, a story trick. This is the lamest story trick ever, right? 8 kings, threat, 10, you know where I'm going with this, 2, save, 95 queens from 1 sick knave, right? The 8 kings stack, that's my stack. This is my story trick that uses, you know, a handful of cards there. You can use this for a story trick, where you're just using a stack, or some other kind of sequence trick like a gambling routine, where you appear to be shuffling the cards. And of course you can do this in between reveals, right? But then you get, you know, ultimately... Oh, by the way, if you want to add things to this, you can do false cuts, right? False table cuts or something like that, where it looks like you're cutting the cards. You can look up a variety of those. But anyway, I'm at a point here where I can continue with my story, right? 8 kings threaten to save 95 queens from 1 sick knave, right? And I've got my story sequence out there, whatever. So you can use it for a large stack as a force to maintain that. So as a lot of things that you can do with this. You can use it to control selections. You can use it to force a particular card. You can use it to do a complex force where you're forcing a variety of cards to come up with an entirely different identity, something I love to do. And you can use it to maintain a stack for a story trick or a gambling demonstration. The easiest gambling demonstration you've ever done, right? You just put the sequence together of the things that you want to do and just do overhand shuffles, falsify it, and maintain that top stock. And you can pretend to do all kinds of amazing. You can pretend to be doing bottom dealing with some duplicate cards in a stack, right? You put the spares underneath and show that we're going to put our aces on the bottom, right? And then you say, and I can shuffle the cards, and then I can still maintain the order, and I can deal them from the top, or just set them underneath and deal off the duplicates, right? You can do all kinds of crazy stuff just by maintaining a top stock with an overhand shuffle. So very, very solid move that everyone should know, and it could be the only move you use and do an hour's worth of magic just with that one thing, so long as you can cull and organize your cards properly when you need to. So anyway, that's it. The overhand, false, shuffle, top stock retention, and hopefully you enjoyed this little discussion on this little topic and you find a use for it, and I wish you happy magicking.